Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hansen, and I'm a registered dietitian and the Director of Nutrition Systems. I would like to welcome you to this edition of our dietitian-led nutrition series, Nourish to Flourish. For those of you that have joined us in the past, we're glad you're back. And if this is your first time joining us, well then welcome. This series was created as a direct response to so many of you asking for more educational material and content on nutrition. Our webinars are presented every 6 weeks, and our hope is that today and for our upcoming webinars that you'll find the information that we will be sharing relevant and useful. We would like to give a special thanks to our life enrichment and dining services teams for their efforts behind the scenes in helping us bring this nutrition series to you. We greatly appreciate all of their support. For today's topic, our speaker will be discussing the key nutrients for the older adult. And please note that our next webinar is scheduled for September 11th, and the topic is how to limit your sodium intake. So please plan to join us then. Before we get started, there are a few things I would like to cover. First, please note that everyone joining the call will be placed on mute to ensure that there, to ensure that there is no background noise and that is easy to hear our speaker. So if you have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat box below. We will save some time at the end to answer as many questions as possible. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. So if you choose not to be recorded, then please turn off your camera. With that, I would like to take a moment and introduce today's speaker. Our speaker today is Anetta Theo. Anetta is a registered dietitian and was recently promoted to the position of Director of Dining Services at Plymouth Village. She was previously the Assistant Director of Dining Services at the Terraces of San Joaquin Gardens, and prior to becoming a dietitian was a health coach for 5 years. Anetta received her Bachelor of Science degree from Georgia State University and her Master's in Nutrition and Dietetics from Marywood University. And I think it is safe to say that Anetta is definitely a lifelong learner and teacher of all things nutrition. And we are so happy to have her joining us today. And so with that, Anetta, if you're ready, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As I was hearing my own introduction and the last comment about being a lifelong learner, that is definitely something that I consider myself to be. And one of the questions I often ask myself is, how can I put it all together so that even myself, I can eat in a healthy way and bring some of these key nutrients in. And the world of nutrition, as you can imagine, is quite vast. And I imagine that if you're here joining us, it means that you are really interested in nutrition and healthy eating, which also means that you're also a lifelong learner, and you're probably getting a lot of information from maybe the internet, the news, or maybe even reading. There's a lot of different books being published, a lot of information out there. And I notice one of the things that can happen is we might get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's out there. Before, we had the problem of not necessarily having access to high quality information, and now we might have the opposite. We have too much information. So this presentation is about key nutrients for an older adult. But those key nutrients really could be anything. From the standpoint of being a nutrition professional, I'm thinking to myself, all the nutrients are very, very important. If you're missing even one thing, let's say B12, then that can have consequences in the body. So as I was coming up with ideas for this presentation, I really had to wonder to myself, what are these key nutrients for the older adult? As I work with my residents and I hear the questions that they ask, about nutrition, or maybe the different food offerings that we have in the dining program, we always come back to the ultimate question, which is, what should I eat to stay healthy? And as I'm thinking about that question and you're thinking about that question, I had to really try to come up with what can I tell you that will help guide you to make healthy decisions for yourself the majority of the time? So by no means is this conversation is going to cover all the different key nutrients for the older adult. What I wanted to do is I wanted to direct your attention to what I came up with, which is the top two medical conditions that we are really facing, especially as we get older. We are facing the epidemic of heart disease and the epidemic of diabetes. Those seem to be the top two chronic medical conditions that are really affecting our population. And especially as we get older, these seem to be the top things that are affecting us. Things like high blood pressure is incredibly common. Heart disease, anything from like maybe high cholesterol or any of those other kinds of things that can affect our cardiovascular health. So what I did was I looked at heart disease, and then the second thing that always comes up is managing our blood sugar and diabetes. That seems to be the other most prominent thing that is prevalent in the United States. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to come up with a strategy that would help the majority of my listeners and kind of categorize these key nutrients for the older adult into two categories. So what I came up with is heart disease and diabetes. And for that reason, I came up with some strategies that I'd like to share with you in this conversation. So essentially what we're looking at is when we're thinking about the heart, we're thinking about making sure that our cardiovascular system, which is the heart and the blood that's being pumped through the heart, why the blood is so important is because it carries all the nutrients and the oxygen. And the blood in our system is connected to every single cell in the body. Without the red blood cells traveling to every part, we really wouldn't be here. So our goal is to make sure that we are taking care of our heart, and as a consequence, making sure that the bloodstream is healthy, that the blood pressure is not too high, not too low, that it's just right, so that all of these nutrients that are flowing through the bloodstream are getting to every single cell in the body, including the brain, all the tissues, your organs, your kidneys, liver, your lungs. All of these organs are critical for making the whole human body flourish. And so our goal is to make sure that we're taking care of the blood. But how do we do that? That's how diabetes also then ties into this conversation. That's why when I'm thinking about the heart, I'm thinking of the bloodstream, and I'm also thinking of diabetes, because what does diabetes do? Diabetes makes it so that there is excess sugar in our bloodstream, and that actually can start to interfere with healthy functioning in the body. That excess sugar in the bloodstream is now traveling to all parts of us, right? It's touching our brain, it's touching our kidneys, it's touching a lot of, our eyes even. You might have heard that diabetes can affect your eyesight. So all of this is connected. So as we're thinking about this beautiful organ called the heart that is pumping blood through our body, we're also thinking about ways to keep it healthy. So even though I've separated heart disease and diabetes together, and I'm going to talk about the strategies of how do you eat and include these key nutrients in, we are going to look at the heart and maintaining healthy blood glucose levels. Even though they're separated, I do think of them as being together. All of these nutrients are always interacting together. Without one, the other one goes out of balance. It's just like a seesaw. So the thing to focus on is making sure that we're not overhauling our entire diet. We're looking at what are some of the strategies we can use to incrementally add some of these healthier things and kind of ramp up. You don't want to change everything too quickly. You just want to start to look at what are some of the greens and veggies that we can add. How can we look at our salt intake or sodium? And for the right-hand side, when we're looking at healthy blood sugar levels, how does protein relate to that? How does fiber relate to that? And how does sugar relate to that? So that's kind of the overview of the conversation that we're having today. And we are going to start with our heart health. which is the first two strategies. And let's just take a moment to appreciate the vibrant colors of this picture. It kind of pulls it all together in a little heart shape, and just to show you that it's showcasing some of the healthy fats, some of the vegetables, the protein. What you see in the center is some olive oil, which we know is a healthier fat. You have some salmon, which has omega-3s. You have oranges, which have vitamin C and fiber and keep you hydrated. You have lentils and peas and beans and nuts. And for me, what this picture represents, and then of course you have some spinach in the middle because you have to have the greens, right? What to me this picture represents is the idea of a whole foods-based diet with lots of color. It's very vibrant, it's inviting, it has protein, it has carbohydrates, vegetables. It's really the whole picture thinking that we're looking at. So that's what this picture represents to me. And as we move forward, when I'm thinking about the heart, I think I'm thinking of something different than what you're thinking of. We talked about the blood, right? The heart is pumping blood in our system, and you're probably thinking color red, right? That's probably what everybody's thinking when they're thinking of the heart. We always depict the heart in popular culture as being red, which is true because the blood that we see is actually red in color. But when I'm thinking about the heart and the foods that are supportive for the heart, it's actually green food. And I will tell you a little bit more about that and why that's important and how that works. But when you're thinking of the heart after this conversation, I'm hoping that you will be thinking of all the green foods. And of course, because I love science, I want to just showcase one little fun fact, I think, about plants and the differences in this blood system. Before we dive into the nutrition piece, what I want to showcase is actually the reason that plants are green is because they have chlorophyll, plant chlorophyll. And as we're looking at the picture on the screen, what you'll notice is I have on the left side plant chlorophyll, and on the right side, I have human hemoglobin, Hem B. And the reason I want to share this is I want to showcase the similarity between plant blood, which is your chlorophyll. That's what allows plants to do their thing and, do their energetic processes. But if you'll notice, the centerpiece has Mg in it, that's magnesium, and on the right it has Fe, which is iron. But if you look at the shape between plant chlorophyll, which is the blood of plants, let's say, and then human hemoglobin, which contributes to the bloodstream of humans, how similar they really are. And I think one of the reasons for why we're so compatible with eating plants, right? We can't eat all plants, but the ones that are edible, they really do something different for us, our physiology and biology. They help us stay healthy and vital. And I'll talk about, some of these processes. But when I'm thinking about just the larger picture of biology and how perfectly these things fit together, and I start to notice the similarities between human hemoglobin and plant chlorophyll, I just feel like that's a very interesting thing. And so I wanted to showcase that picture for you. So when we're thinking about green plants, I love this picture of the heart here because to be honest, the greens are really what will help to manage your cardiovascular system and keep your blood pressure in the correct zone. And why is that? Well, because plant chlorophyll, the green stuff that makes plants green, is an antioxidant, and it really helps to support the blood system, the cardiovascular system. It promotes robust circulation, which is what we want, especially as we get older. The circulation, the better your circulation is, the more you get those nutrients to all parts of your body. And that's really key. That's part of the reason we always say you should exercise, you should move your body. That's to promote circulation. The better your circulation is, the more those nutrients and the oxygen will go to all parts of your body, all of your organs, and keep you healthy. Green plants also have folate. This nutrient, along with B6 and B12, vitamins B6 and B12, is needed to lower homocysteine, which correlates with heart disease. stroke and DVTs. I know one of the things that can also happen to us as we get older is we get DVTs. And making sure that we are incorporating green plants, especially vegetables, but fruits as well. It will help to increase our amount of folate and chlorophyll, and that will promote circulation. It will promote healthy blood flow. And that will in turn help to prevent some of these issues of heart disease and stroke. Let's take a look at green beans. I know that we serve a lot of green beans on our menus in the dining room. It's an important part of the dining program to incorporate, and I know a lot of our residents eat green beans and have enjoyed them as they're growing up, and it's a fixture. And so I wanted to highlight that green beans have protein, fiber, and what we call phenolic compounds. And that's just a fancy word for plant-based compounds that are healthy for humans. They're phenolic compounds. And it's a family of different kinds of compounds, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And every single day we discover new ones to add. But essentially, it is a plant compound in green beans, and it's found in other plants as well. But basically what it does is protect us against coronary heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and inflammation. So this color green that we are associating with, if you look at the picture, we have celery, cucumbers, okra, green beans, zucchini, lettuces, any of the lettuces. I know there's a lot of fans of iceberg lettuce out there and romaine lettuce, and it's absolutely fine to eat that. I know I've heard from time to time that maybe iceberg lettuce has no nutritional value to it. And I just want to point out that maybe if you're comparing it to, like, let's say protein, or if you're comparing it to kale, they have a different arrangement of nutrients inside, but it doesn't mean that iceberg lettuce is not a good thing to eat. It has the fiber and it has some of those phenolic compounds in it that will still add hydration, fiber, and micronutrients to us. So never discount the iceberg lettuce because it does still have some green in it. All that to say that it's really about focusing on all the green plants. It doesn't mean that you only eat zucchini. It doesn't mean that you only eat celery. It means that you focus on the color and you start to pull that color in. If you like apples, that's great. If you love broccoli, that's great. If you hate broccoli, that's also okay. It means that you have a lot of different kinds of foods to choose from. So let's take a look. Leafy greens are an incredibly important part of the strategy. Leafy greens support heart health. In particular, we have things like Swiss chard, arugula, bok choy, collard greens, mixed greens, mustard greens, romaine, spinach, sprouts of all kinds, and watercress. I know that we don't necessarily serve watercress in our accounts, but that doesn't mean that we can't focus on some of those other things. This is just an example of all the different kinds of leafy greens that could be available. But essentially, eating leafy green vegetables is giving you the right amount of micronutrients that are going to help promote the healthy flow of blood in your system. Let's take a look at avocado. That's green, right? I know a lot of residents at Plymouth Village really enjoy avocado. They put it in things like quesadillas. So we have a basic quesadilla that you would order, but I'm noticing a lot of our residents are adding avocado to it. And that's a really great strategy. Quesadilla is a fun food. So it is packed with maybe some more calories, but adding things like avocado to it, adding things like spinach to it will help to balance the fun food part of it, which is higher in calories, especially from fat. But then you're adding some fiber to it. You're adding some of that green to it, and it helps to balance it out. So that's a great thing to do. Avocados can lower cardiovascular disease risk in both men and women. So if you can sneak in a little bit of avocado here and there, that's great. Let's talk about a new compound that is being actively researched. It's a group of compounds called sulforaphane, and they are found in our Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, and radishes. And this is a very, very special compound that scientists are actively researching. And it's because we are now starting to see that it helps with cancer prevention or promoting how do I want to say this? Basically boosting the immune system so that it has protective benefits against neurodegeneration. It helps, so it helps the brain, it helps the blood system, cardiovascular system. And all of these vegetables that have the sulforaphane in it are what we call cruciferous vegetables, and they are an incredibly important part of our diet, and all of them can be green except for the radishes. But just another example of how, even though we're focusing on key nutrients, how it's all really tied together. So always remember, when you're thinking about the heart, think of your greens and green vegetables and some of your green fruits. For example, the grapes are in there as well. All right. So one thing when we're talking about cardiovascular system as well, the second key nutrient to focus on, sodium. But in this case, we are not looking to add more sodium to your diet. We're actually looking to make sure that we are staying within a certain range for sodium. One way to look at it is every single day, you are allotted, let's say on average, for most people, 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day would be considered within what we would call a normal range. But what that means is you have all day to kind of distribute this sodium across different meals. So if you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe 2 snacks in between, you really want to make sure that you're not going over 2,000 milligrams over the course of the day. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can start to look at how much sodium something has. One thing my residents often tell me is, I love the soup, but it's a little bit saltier. Or, I love ham, but it's a bit saltier, right? Those are the foods that we typically come across that will have more salt. And what I say to that is, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat the soups or that you shouldn't eat ham. What it means is, and you probably guessed it, is you want to incorporate your leafy greens and vegetables. And if you're having the high salt item for, let's say, lunch, you just want to make sure that for dinner, you're eating something that doesn't have as much sodium. Now, one thing you might be wondering about is, if I'm going out and I'm looking at labels, I'm reading food labels, or maybe I'm reading my nutrient analysis in my dining program, and I'm looking to see how much sodium is in my food, what are these numbers really meaning? So if you're going out and you're purchasing from the store, you might have noticed that food companies will write down that a food has very low sodium, reduced sodium, light in sodium, or no salt added. So I just wanted to come up with this chart for you guys so that you could see what that really means. The food industry does not necessarily regulate all of these terms, so they can be really confusing. You might think that you're buying something that is low sodium, but it's not as healthy for you as you might originally think. So this chart basically talks about salt or sodium free is less than 5 milligrams of sodium per serving, which is actually very, very low salt and would be a great option, especially if you're trying to stay under 2,000 milligrams a day. Very low sodium is 35 milligrams. And remember, we're looking to stay around 2,000 per day, so that's actually quite a bit. Low sodium is 140 milligrams per serving. Reduced sodium is 25% less sodium than its regular counterpart. Light in sodium or lightly salted is at least 50% less sodium than the regular product. And no salt added or unsalted means that they didn't add salt during processing. But these products may not be salt or sodium free unless it's specifically stated. And then on the right side, if you direct your attention there, I have the nutrition facts label. And the main thing about reading labels is making sure that you look at your serving size, and then you go down to the amount of sodium in the product, and that's how you would determine how much something is in terms of sodium. And food companies do have to disclose the amount of salt in an item. So for example, if you're looking at this chart, in the yellow column where it says nutrients, the third one down is sodium, and this food item has 850 milligrams of sodium in it. And if you're wanting to do only 2,000, you can see that only 1 cup of this food already puts you at almost half your budgeted sodium for the day. And that's things like your potato chips or processed foods. So the whole idea is if you're eating whole foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, you will actually be naturally eating a low sodium diet. So it's perfect. The more processed foods you eat, the more salt you're going to eat. All right, some tips to cut out sodium. You want to make sure that you're eating foods that have less than 300 milligrams of sodium per food item. And if you see that salt shaker on the table, try not to salt your food, especially if you're trying to keep yourself in a certain range. So that's taking things away. But if you know me, you know that I don't like to take things away without adding things in. So let's add in fruits, vegetables, salads, whole grains. Then we might want to look at removing processed foods, cookies, cakes, snacks, and chips. But we want to start adding more herbs, spices, and other ways of flavoring foods, because the flavor can be in the herbs and spices, not necessarily in the salt. All right, moving on to our other side of the spectrum, where we're looking more at how can we help maintain our blood sugars, because blood sugars in diabetes especially can really affect the flow of blood in the system and affect how we metabolize or incorporate nutrients into our body. So we want to make sure that we're adding things in to help manage our blood sugar levels. One of the best ways to do that is to make sure that we're getting enough protein. One of the things that starts to happen as we get older, and I've heard this from a lot of you, is that your tastes start to change, your ability to digest foods the way that you did maybe when you were 30, 40, 50, 60 has changed as well. And one of the main ones that I hear is that you might not be as interested in eating meat. That seems to be the one thing that I hear a lot about, is maybe your ability to digest meat is not what it used to be, or maybe you don't have the same taste for it. But interestingly enough, we know as dietitians that you actually need more protein as you get older in order to make sure that you are maintaining your muscle mass, which is very important for good quality of life, making sure that you're not losing muscle, which is what we call sarcopenia, which means less muscle mass. And if we start to lose our muscle mass, a lot of other things start to be affected in the body as well. So we want to make sure that you're getting enough protein. So we have to find ways to do that, even if it's not beef, for example, which we also know has lots of saturated fat in it. And you may have heard that that's unhealthy for you. So in an effort to make sure that you're eating enough protein, you can digest it more easily, it's important to find different and a variety of different protein sources so that you are maintaining your intake of protein, because it helps to balance your blood sugar as well. It helps with satiety, so feeling like you're full and you've eaten well. It helps with emotional stability and brain health. And it helps to maintain your weight as well, because ultimately we want to be in a healthy range. We don't want to be overweight, but we also don't want to be underweight. I know some of my residents have also experienced not being able to put on weight. So if you're losing weight too fast, that's unhealthy. Or if you're carrying around too much weight, that can also be unhealthy. So really what we want to do is make sure that we are eating enough protein, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, making sure that we're adding that in. And that will help us to maintain our muscle mass, balance our blood sugars, and help us feel good and satisfied with our meals. All right, taking a closer look to balancing blood sugar and improving weight, we also can look at eating a protein-rich food along with the carbohydrates. Don't forget your carbohydrates, especially when we're looking at diabetes as a whole. We want to make sure that we're not just eating carbs by themselves. We want to add some kind of protein. So for example, in the picture at the top, the first picture is some oatmeal with some banana. You have some fiber from apple, and there's an egg right there. So the egg is providing the protein. So making sure that if you're eating breakfast, don't forget your protein. That's one of the more common things that I tend to see. And the other plate is showing you some rice. So even though that's not a whole grain because it's white rice, as you'll notice, it's balanced out by the veggies and the protein. And then on the far right, you have the salmon, and you see how you have a lot of veggies, beautiful colors, lots of fiber, and that all balances out together. Protein-rich foods tend to be more filling than carb-rich foods, or even certain high-fat foods. Now, also remember, you don't want to eat too much protein because it needs to be in a certain balance. Because if your body's not utilizing the protein, it actually can be also converted to glucose. But the majority of people don't necessarily need to worry about that. This is mostly for things like ketogenic diet or something like that, where people start to overconsume their protein. Just make sure that you're staying in more of an average range, unless your doctor specifically is saying that you need to eat a certain amount, or your dietitian says you need a certain amount. And then, of course, we already touched on this, but making sure that you are seeing that protein increases muscle mass and ultimately does help maintain a healthy weight. So one of the culprits in terms of throwing off your blood sugars is going to be the amount of sugar that you're intaking. And I know you all already know this, but I just want to point it out again in an infographic way, which is making sure that if you are having sweet treats, which all of these are, in my view, sweet drinkable treats, you have juice, which is also sugar. So even though it has some components of oranges, it still has 11 teaspoons of sugar in it, for example. So when I'm talking to a diabetic, I am going to tell them and encourage them to eat fruit, not drink fruit. And that would be something that would be a great alternative, because it means that you can eat some of your fruits and not have to drink them, which will spike your blood sugar. So that's a healthier way of incorporating fruits into your diet. But it's not to say that you can't have your orange juice, because I know that can be a favorite, cranberry juice or apple juice. It's a sweet treat. And just making sure that we are knowing that, and we're noticing that, and we're incorporating it into our daily eating plan. Knowing that we then have to eat our leafy greens, we have to eat our protein, so we are balancing out these sugars that we're eating. Soda, as you know, also has lots of sugar in it. 10 teaspoons if you're drinking regular soda. I know one of the trends and favorites is having diet sodas. So that does have less sugar in it. Any of the fancy drinks that might be coffee drinks or frappuccinos, things like that, or even smoothies, for example, they are going to have more sugar in them as well. Energy drinks, I don't imagine that a lot of you are drinking energy drinks, but they do tend to have a lot of sugar in them as well. And then sports drinks. These are your Gatorades or maybe electrolyte type drinks. They can be part of a healthy, balanced diet, but just also knowing that they do add sugar to that. So ultimately, what I would say is it's all about creating a holistic approach to your eating. I don't advocate for eliminating food groups, because I do feel that there is a place for orange juice, there is a place for apple juice in the diet. It's just making sure that we are, watching our sodium, watching our sugar, and balancing them out by adding leafy greens and the next thing, which is whole grains. Your whole grains, and even veggies as well, provide one of the most important key nutrients that is healthy not only for older adults, but also for everybody. And this is the one that typically is missed, is fiber. Fiber is very critical. And fiber is also bundled with not only whole grains, but also with our veggies. So the more veggies and whole grains we're eating, the more fiber we're eating. And that tends to be a food group that we like to eat in its refined form. So we tend to prefer white potatoes or white rice. And really the strategy here, if you want a healthy cardiovascular system, a healthy, robust blood system, we want to start to incorporate fiber as much as we can. because fiber improves digestion. It has trace minerals, different micronutrients, and it has insoluble fiber, which helps to bulk up our stools and helps to move food more quickly through our digestive tract. And that is incredibly important and healthy for us. We want to have regular bowel movements, and that helps to balance out everything in the body. So part of it is also making sure that the fiber, and I've heard this metaphor before, but it's almost like a gentle brush. And just like we want to make sure that everything outside of us is clean, we are always sweeping and we're mopping and we're taking out the cobwebs and doing that sort of thing. Fiber can be thought of kind of like that. It is going through the system and it's clearing things up and it's catching things like your LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is the one that your doctor tells you is not as healthy for you. You want more HDL cholesterol, high. You want the HDL to be higher, LDL, you want it to be lower. And one way to do that is you want to include fiber. And so the fiber will kind of start to catch some of these things like the LDL and help to move it through. Also, you've probably heard about having a healthy gut and a healthy microbiome. Your fruits, veggies, which also have the fiber, your whole grains, they start to go through the digestive system and they start talking with the microbiome, and they have this interaction together where your microbiome starts to be happy, you're feeding it with these fibrous compounds, giving it the micronutrients, they feel happy and they start to produce different compounds that actually are adding to your system. So I like to think of it as an ecology. We have the ecology outside, which is the trees, the plants, everything outside of us. And we have an internal ecology, which is our organs, our cells, and the microbiome, all the microorganisms that live inside of us that are interacting together. And all of this is coming together to help us stay, have a good immune system, stay healthier and more vital, live longer, because it's keeping everything in balance. And fiber, and I can't stress this enough, but fiber is the one thing we tend to not want to eat as much. Fiber is not as fun to eat. It's not as satisfying, but it is the thing that really helps to keep us healthy. So that is a key nutrient that is important. And how you get fiber is, of course, your veggies. In the context of this conversation, definitely leafy greens and your green veggies, and then the whole grains. So hopefully I have convinced you, even though this color palette is monochromatic and it's maybe those tans and browns, and you have like your buckwheat and your millet and your brown rice. I know brown rice is not necessarily the most favorite of my residents, but I'm hoping that by sharing with you how important this is and how it is still beautiful, it still adds a richness, a nuttiness, a different flavor profile, that I can start to encourage you to try and eat some of these whole grains, knowing that they are doing so much for your body. And then what other way can we get some of these healthy things in our system is we can also add beans and lentils, which can also provide some protein for us as well. We can do chickpeas, that's your dietary fiber. It even has some really healthy fatty acids in there, which is great for your heart. All kinds of vitamins, folate, potassium, magnesium, iron, and it's really helpful in lowering the bad cholesterol, which is your LDL cholesterol. We also have things like lentils, also has some protein, fiber, iron. It really helps to maintain blood glucose levels, helps with weight management, and improves cardiovascular health. And then, of course, beans. You have protein, folate, antioxidants. It improves your heart health, blood sugar regulation, and it even helps to improve your gut health. And I know one of the main things that I also kind of hear about is digestion issues. Maybe you can't tolerate beans. Maybe you can't tolerate chickpeas or lentils. The key here to focus on is trying them in smaller quantities, because the quantity can also affect digestion. Or you can try finding different things that you can tolerate. So let's say I can't really do very well with beans. Maybe I eat less beans, or maybe I eat chickpeas, or maybe I eat lentils. So the idea isn't that you have to eat all of these different things. The idea is to find the things that you can eat and make sure that it's from every food group. And that's the fun of it, right? The fun is to try to find what is it that works for your system, trying new flavors, trying new kinds of beans, lentils, and really starting to appreciate some of these more complex flavors that are often found in your whole grains, beans, and lentils. So the next question might be, okay, Anetta, this is all great information. You told us all the different facts. Maybe you've inspired us to try these new different things, but how do I put it all together? And if you have come to any of my other talks, or maybe you know me, we've talked together, you probably know that this is my favorite thing to talk about, is the My Plate Planner. And why is that? Well, honestly, it's because it's the easiest way that I have found to talk about all of these very important and complicated science and nutrition facts and put them, for lack of a better word, on one plate for you. This makes it so that we are following a more visual guide for how to put our plates together. And you don't have to worry about remembering, did she say it has to be a quarter cup? Did she say it's a tablespoon? Did she say I have to have olive oil with this? Did she say that I need to have a quarter cup or a half a cup or 4 ounces? I want to take all that pressure off of you. And I want to show it the plate in such a way that you can follow it just by having some of the main principles in mind, but also using your plate as a visual guide. And the beautiful thing about this method is that if you are following this, it means that you are getting more whole grains, more protein, more vegetables, and more fruits into your diet, which means that you are getting the key nutrients that are going to help sustain your systems. So if you're looking at the center here, right underneath the plate, you have a little ruler. So this is a 9-inch plate, which is a pretty standard sized plate. And we are thinking of our plate in terms of quarters. And please excuse me for one moment whilst I stay hydrated. We are thinking of our plate in terms of quarters. And it's really, really important that we maintain the proportions, because it's the proportions that help to keep everything in balance and get us the right micronutrients. Because if there's not enough protein, you don't get the signal in your body to build more muscle, because there's not enough amino acids to get you to that threshold. And so it's important to make sure that if you're eating like this, you're eating the correct volume or proportion. So think of it as quarters. It also means, and this is great news, that you get to have starches. You get to have that fulfilling component of what I think we all probably enjoy, which is our rice and our pasta and things like that. But knowing that it has to be in that quadrant, that quarter of the plate, knowing that we then have to add another quarter, and that's your protein. And then we have to add, and the reason I think of it as quarters, even though on the right side, you're seeing half the plate as veggies, think of it as veggie 1 and veggie 2. And it doesn't have to just be all raw veggies. It doesn't have to just be all broccoli, because I know that not everyone's like me and loves broccoli so much they eat it every single day. It really means that you want to make sure that half the plate is veggies of some sort, and it can be any combination that you like. But this is the proportion that will create the desired effect of maintaining blood sugars, making sure you're not having too much sodium, making sure that you're getting your vitamins, minerals, proteins, all of the things that will help you stay in balance. It would be by eating it in this proportion. And then as you'll notice on the top left, you do have a place for dessert. And I'm not saying that half an orange is the only dessert you could ever have, because I know that some of the favorite things that my residents love to eat is the ice cream. Of course, we have Rocky Road is a favorite here in Bunny Tracks, and I feel like you could relate. But that dessert could be there as well. And then on the right side, you have water, which is the golden standard of hydration, of course, and you would probably agree, but it can be a different drink as well. So think of it this way. Think of it as this starting baseline plate. If you have all of the things in correct proportion on your plate and you eat those items, what you will actually notice is you will have less desire for some of those other items, and you'll end up eating ice cream, but you might eat a little bit less. So you'll still enjoy the ice cream, but you won't eat as much of it. And that'll help to keep you in balance as well. So this is my methodology. This is, of course, a picture. And what I would like to show you is what it might look like at in our dining room. So this is a 9-inch plate, and this is my my configuration of some of the things that we have pulled off of the buffet line. And as you can tell, I kept the starch the same just to show you that consistency there. So you have a quarter of the starch, you have your protein, and then you have your veggies on half the plate. And as you can see, I have actually given you different options for veggies. And it can be different. So let's say you absolutely hate green beans, even though they're so good for you. You can do carrots. And I know there's a debate about carrots being too starchy, but honestly, I would much rather you eat carrots in this proportion and feel satisfied and get your vitamin A, get your other fiber from it, and other really great things that come with carrots. And this configuration with the protein and the amount of veggies that you're getting will help to balance that out. And then the last plate on the far right, you have a little bit of a Caesar salad right there. And then you have your carrots, you have your rice, and you have your pork chop. And that's an example of what that can look like where you live. Another quick example, I have polenta. I have pulled pork, but even though those items are a little bit more rich because they have maybe a sauce with them, they have some cream, they might have butter, you can see that I've balanced it out on the other end with your veggies. So I have cabbage and I have a green salad. And on the far right, I balanced it with green beans and a salad. And my last example, one of my favorite examples to use is shepherd's pie. I know a lot of people love shepherd's pie, but what tends to happen is shepherd's pie takes over your plate, right? It's so tasty and delicious, you could just keep eating it forever. But the way to balance out those calories, maybe that high fat content, is actually to do it more in this configuration. And this is what I mean by balancing out your foods. You can still enjoy shepherd's pie, but make sure that you eat enough of your green beans, make sure you're eating your leafy greens, and that will give you the fiber so that you can help to balance out your plate and not end up eating shepherd's pie, which if I'm being honest, I do this too. I want to put more shepherd's pie on my plate, but that would really be how you could get all of the essential vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein that you need in your diet using the MyPlate method. Which brings us to our final slide, where we talk about the takeaways for today. We talked about the key nutrients for the older adult, and I kind of flipped the script a little bit and tried to give you an overview of how you might think about key nutrients for yourself and what those strategies, overall strategies, can be to meet your needs. And that would be to, number one, increase your vegetables and leafy greens to help support your heart and keep everything flowing as it should and getting those nutrients to all of your organs. Increase your whole grains and your fiber, and that's of course through all of the veggies, especially the green ones, and your whole grains. You want to reduce your sugar, processed sugar intakes, and you want to reduce your salt. And those would be my main key takeaways for this conversation, which brings me to any questions you might have. Thank you so much for being here with me today and for following along on this presentation with me. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Anetta. That was a wonderful presentation. I think we all learned a lot and definitely appreciated all the takeaways too. So some great practical tips for us to be able to use and to implement. And as Anetta said, we wanted to save a few moments at the end of the presentation, as we always do. And if anyone has any questions, you can certainly put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. Please feel free. Jetson Park.
Great, okay. Well, usually when there aren't a lot of questions coming in, I like to think of it as a sign that I did my due diligence and I presented something that maybe answered all of your questions as we were going along through the slides. Hopefully you were able to see that really it's all about your heart and your blood system, your cardiovascular system, and how it all relates to blood pressure and diabetes, and how by incorporating a lot of these whole grains and veggies and protein, that really that's all you need. And you have access to the dining program, which already provides you with an option usually of at least 2 entrees, 2 veggies, and a starch. And that is the basis of the My Plate method. And really, we have made every effort to present it in such a way because that is truly what will give you all of the nutrients that you need. So if we go back to this plate, this is how we have kept the dining program in mind for you, so that we have provided all those options. And I encourage you to try all the different things, maybe try new things, and really try to arrange them in these proportions. And I think you will have a lot of great success.
And I think, Chung, you have a comment?
Yes, I have a comment. I
Yes,
like your talk. I like your final conclusion slide, and I took some screenshot. I hope I can use it in my teaching. There's a different way I'm going to teach. I think that the way you divided heart disease and diabetes and use different food, say this is good for this, good for that. In my teaching, I would say all the food you talk about are good for both the diseases. In fact, that the green color from the plant, it just happened. Those micronutrients fibers are in the plant. The green color, you look at structure of chlorophyll and heme, they look structure, but functionally, I do not know they have any functional relationship. That means you do not use chlorophyll to make heme. But, so that's my comment. In my teaching, I would teach all the nutrients are essential, are good for you. And when you have deficient, you have problems like too much salt will contribute to hypertension, and too much sugar, too much carbohydrate, too much fat would will contribute to the development of insulin resistant and diabetes. So in a sense, I think if you talk about this food is for how that food is for that, there's very weak scientific evidence on that. That's my comment. But overall, I like your talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, those are great comments. And what I would say to that is, I think one of the challenges we might face as dietitians is the things that are really healthy and good for us, we can all generally agree on, which is your whole foods, not too much meat that's with saturated fat. But then my challenge becomes, or my desire becomes, to inspire people to really eat the things that are going to give us the most benefit, which is going to be your fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and lean protein in whatever form that you are able to get it. And so my hope is that ultimately I have inspired you to try broccoli and kale and salads, because I truly believe that those things are really good for you, and they're, a source of nourishment for all of us. So thank you so much.
That's great. Well, thank you all. If there's no more questions, again, I just want to remind you of our next webinar, and that will be held on September 11th. And the topic will be on ways to strategize to reduce your sodium intake. Again, we want to say thank you for everyone who participated today. And again, a huge thank you to Anetta for a wonderful presentation. Really appreciated it and enjoyed it. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you in a couple months. Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you, Netta. Nice job. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, this is much.